In the 1850s, the United States had a contract to secure mail service. The Butterfield Overland stage route was initiated in 1857, and where people could actually ship freight mail, or if they were brave enough souls, could ride along in the stagecoach, a trip of probably 25 days from Missouri to Northern California.
Hello and good day. My name is Kenny Dale and I'm professor of history at Arizona Western College here in Yuma, Arizona. The 1800s saw a variety of transportation modes that assisted in the market revolution at the same time. People moving goods and people across the country changed through a variety of modes, from canals to railroads, and the stagecoaches were part of that. The Pony Express was part of that as well. Westward movement is still going on today. Even in the 21st century, some of the fastest growing cities in the United States are in the West. Places like Las Vegas are some of the fastest growing cities in the United States. So westward movement continues, even though it's by different modes and methodologies.
The stagecoach in the early West really opened travel up to everyone.
The Butterfield stage trail ran mostly along rivers and had stations every few miles, usually where there was a well where they could find water.
Which became small towns across the Southwest as well.
The stage line brought mail, passengers, people, and ran for a time period in parts of the West that didn't have the railroads.
Stage travel was really not cheap. It was a rough trip. You were on really unpaved roads. You were on trails that would really just bump you along. And by the time you got anywhere, you were pretty dusty. But these little stage stops where they would change out the horses, you could get off the stage. You could also have a nice meal. You'd have to pay for it. Get back on. So the stage travel, if you're seeing it on an old Western movie, it looked pretty glamorous. But don't forget, the Gila Trail, the southern route, was coming through a very sandy environment.
Railroads expanded differentially compared to the stage lines, and so many paths were used. The Pony Express was in existence for carrying the mail only for a couple of years before the rail lines and the telegraphs changed communication and transportation. So the Butterfield stage was a very important part of westward movement and the transportation revolution.
One of the things that I find most fascinating about Tucson is it sits right on trails that have great historic value, that are so important to the development of this part of the country. The Anza expedition, of course, comes up the river right to the west of where I'm standing now. Prehistorically, trading trails among the native peoples had been happening up and down this river valley, and Tucson was probably an important stopping point for them even. Later on, we see the Mormon Battalion come through. We see all the military expeditions going up and down the river. During the Civil War, the California Column runs right up that river, right by Tucson. It's just one person after another is here. One interesting thing is the Butterfield stage. That stage route is still visible in a lot of places. You can still see it. It runs right by Tucson. It ran right into downtown Tucson, as a matter of fact. And then it heads on north. It goes past Janes Station, where the Janes Station Road is still there in the north side of Tucson. It goes up to the Picacho. And for many years, you could still find relics from the Butterfield stage still on the ground up at the Picacho. The peak at Picacho actually sits high out of the ground, very visible as a point to aim at as you're traveling. Well, the military, of course, uses it too.
The Butterfield stage line coincided with the start of the Civil War, and the Confederacy had moved west into Arizona.
The Confederates, when they came into Arizona in 1861, actually went ahead and established a listening post up at that spot.
This led the California column to come marching, the Federal column from California to march east and meet the Confederates at a few battles like Stanwix Station and Picacho Peak.
It's a skirmish, but a few people die and we have a lot of gunshots made. Immediately after that, the Confederates realize this is an untenable position and they retreat. Interestingly, the California column also retreats after having that battle to regroup and come back down again.
These were skirmishes, not part of the main body of the Civil War, but they happened around Butterfield stage stations because those were sources of supplies and fresh water and a chance to rest horses. So the Confederacy attempted to move to the west, and the Federal column from California battled them to successfully to push them back towards Texas.
We're here at Tubac Presidio, and we're looking at this reproduction of a Butterfield celerity wagon, a wagon specifically purchased by Butterfield from Abbott Downing, a wagon manufacturing company. A couple of the key features is this stack of leather here called the leather thorough brace, which acts as a spring to kind of float the wagon box. So that's the shock absorber system. The height of the seat for the conductor is the same as the passenger seats, and these folded down so you could actually lay down in the box. The Butterfield just basically didn't stop. This kind of wagon was used in the place of what you see in the movies of a stagecoach. This is the real stagecoach, what it really looked like in the Southwest. So at the beginning of the Butterfield line in the Missouri area and in California between Los Angeles and San Francisco, they used some of the types of wagons we're more used to seeing in the movies. But out here in the rugged country, this is the kind of wagon that they use, specifically designed to get through the rough desert easier.
This afternoon, we're here in the Sonoran Desert National Monument, and we're still following some historic trails through the center of the monument. This particular trail corridor was used by many people over a millennia, beginning with indigenous people, for sure Juan Bautista de Anza. Then later on in the 19th century, the Mormon Battalion came through here on their way to liberate parts of California. And then later on, the Butterfield Overland stage came through. Some of the people that were headed to the goldfields for the so-called 49ers used this trail. So it was a rather popular east-west trail to follow. And behind me also is a feature that marks part of what we're not sure exactly what it looked like when it was in operation, but we have a sense that probably this was a stage stop for the Butterfield Trail. During the 1857-1861 period, when the Butterfield stage came through, it was on a very tight time constraint. They came through here heading west one part of the week and heading east another part of the week at a certain specific time. And because they were so considerate of that time, a lot of their stops and stations were very short periods indeed. What we see behind us is probably not quite correct. There probably would have been a wooden trough here. I imagine there was probably a corral here for some extra horses, probably a storage room with extra feed or harness or tack or all the things that were needed to keep a stagecoach running as quickly as it could run. It's in a really neat place. It's just at the kind of the western end of the Butterfield Pass. The pass area starts to narrow then as we go through the Maricopa Mountains, and it's quite scenic.